Good morning to members of the press, Facebook viewers, St. Lucians watching from both home and abroad. Thank you for being with us today. Imagine every morning getting a text message from a resident of Asu Canal, a mother, a grandmother, a hard-working St. Lucian. She has not been receiving water in her tap for months. She would say to me, I cannot get water to bathe. I cannot get water to cook. I cannot take care of my family. Miss Marcella, I want water in my tap. That is the reality in our communities today, especially in the north of the island. This is happening right here, every day. Many communities, Grand Riviere, Beausejour, Cap Estate, many communities around the north of the island are suffering from adequate water supply. And yet, 5 long years, this government has allowed this to continue. Water is not a luxury. Water is not a privilege. Water is a basic, very basic necessity. Families in the north have to endure daily rationing, emergency outages, and the uncertainty about when water will run in their taps. Businesses in the north, they operate under disruption, creating many challenges, financial challenges for businesses. Communities are left in distress. And for 5 years, this government has failed to act with the urgency, planning, and accountability that our people, that St. Lucians deserve. The John Compton Dam, our primary water source, has been burdened with millions of cubic meters of silt that has reduced its capacity by over 50%. This is widely documented in official government and WASCO reports, which stated that the full desilting to restore storage capacity could take 8 to 10 years and would involve removing enormous amounts of sediments. Under the UWP administration, prior to 2021, work had begun on the desilting program. Progress was underway, and plans were in motion to remove this sediment that had accumulated for decades. But when this government, this current government, who took office 5 years ago in 2021, they stopped. Yes, they stopped the desilting work, which would have helped to alleviate some of the problems. They halted a project that had already begun. 5 years, nothing was done. Not a spoon, not even one spoonful of silt was removed. Not even one spoonful of silt was removed from the dam. Not a spoon. Imagine, not even a spoonful in 5 years was removed. Despite official government reports showing that approximately 1.5 million cubic meters of sediment had to be removed to restore the dam to its full capacity, nothing was done for 5 years. Had this current government continued the work over 5 years ago, we would not be in this crisis today. we would have had more storage capacity, and perhaps 50% of the silt would have been removed. Instead of continuing the work, we had 5 years of neglect. Neglect by this government. 5 years of inaction. And for the last 3 years, residents in the north have been faced with exacerbated water problems, with increased trucking in various communities around the north. The project that could have prevented this widespread water shortage was left to languish. Families continue to suffer. Communities continue to go without water. And now, after years of this delay, the government has only now secured funding to replace the raw water pipeline, a project that, if addressed earlier, would have helped to bring greater storage capacity to the system many years ago. Ask yourself, why did it take 5 years to get to this point? Why were families left without water while this critical work stopped? Why, when people needed leadership, did this government delay? And here is the stark reality. Reports are that we are now having to import water. In a country like ours with a rainy season, we are now having to import water from Dominica just to keep businesses supplied, residents supplied. Imagine that, importing water from another country when this government failed to manage our resources effectively. Import water from Dominica because this government failed to act. Just remember that. Think about it. Families struggle every day. Children cannot bathe properly. Mothers cannot cook meals properly. Businesses cannot operate reliably. Communities are forced to survive on rationed water. Leadership is not about announcements or press releases. Leadership is about results. Leadership is about taking responsibility when people's basic needs are at stake. Water sustains life. Water sustains families. Water sustains communities. Water sustains our economy. When water fails, confidence in leadership fails. When water fails, trust is broken. When water fails, families suffer. And the question for every St. Lucian is simple. How much longer will families continue to endure this neglect? How much longer would communities wait for a reliable source of water? How much longer will people's basic needs be ignored? We cannot accept delays. We cannot accept excuses. We cannot accept rhetoric without action. St. Lucians deserve and adequate water storage capacity. St. Lucians deserve accountability. St. Lucians deserve urgent action, not empty promises. Urgent action, not empty promises. Water is life. Water is dignity. Water is trust in leadership. And the people of this island deserve it. So we are calling on this government to treat the water situation, especially in the north of this island, with urgency so that families can get access to a reliable source of water. Thank you.
Morning, members of the media. Morning to those of you listening on Facebook. My presentation is on the CIP program and the visa fallout that we've had in recent times. It is with profound sadness and a deep sense of national shame that we must address the reality that as of the 5th of March, the government of the United Kingdom has unilaterally revoked visa-free access. For the first time in our modern history, every St. Lucian national, whether you are a farmer from Fosse Jacques in Soufrière, or from Millet in Ancillary Canneries, a businessman from Roseau, or a student hoping to visit family, must now acquire a visa to set foot in the United Kingdom. Let us be clear about what this means. This is not a bureaucratic adjustment. This is not a statement about this. This is a statement about the standing of our nation in the world. It is a retreat from the trust and privilege we once held as a member of the Commonwealth family. The UK Home Office, under Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood, has been explicit. They have stated that our visa-free entry has been because of two main reasons. One, the increased number of asylum seekers from St. Lucia nationals, but also they have made it absolutely clear that our CIP program, which in the view of the opposition has been badly mismanaged by the St. Lucia Labour Party administration, has been a major source of concern for the United Kingdom. So following sister OECS country Dominica, St. Lucia became the second within the CIP group of countries to have had the visa-free restriction withheld. The facts, according to the UK Home Secretary, are compelling. Between January and December of 2025, there were 360 St. Lucians who claimed asylum, of which 128, or 36%, were made at UK ports. The UK also cites historic sales of the high volume of CIP citizenships issued by St. Lucia, and notes that in the year 2023 to 2024, some 5,642 applicants were received. I repeat, 5,642 applicants were received in a single year by the CIP unit here in St. Lucia. This represents a 423% increase in CIP applications. Note the UK explanatory memorandum. It is interesting to note that the figures cited are only as of March 2024, and we are now in March 2026. It therefore means that this controversial program, which is globally monitored, has now not seen 2 years of reports. I would like to take this opportunity to call on the government in an effort to beef up confidence in the international community and our allies internationally to come forward with the outstanding reports so that there could be a resurgence or a repair of confidence in the management of our CIP program. And so the UK notes that the data available so far is only up to March of 2024. But a quick glance at the CIP website would show that between 2021 and 2024, that the government has approved some 2,000 applications. And they have received over 7,000 applications. It therefore begs the question, why are we so late with 2 years of outstanding reports? Now is really not the time for promises, but now is the time to deliver quick action, to deliver accountability, to make sure that audits are not just done on the revenues and the operations of the CIP unit, but also that we pay a very careful look at the entire CIP program. So the question that looms large this morning is, what are the outstanding amounts in escrow accounts overseas? What is the correct state of play? Those developers, for example, that have had or collected monies on behalf of the CIP program, how much have they collected? How much have they drawn down? How much have they spent on specific projects? It would also be a good time for the government to remind us or to give us an update about what's happening with the planned Rockall housing project. What's happening with the planned housing project that was supposed to have been a CIP development in Canaries? Where did these developers go and where did these projects go? And do you have any updates for us as it pertains to the various developments promised by this administration? And so consequently, the United Workers' Party is calling for an overhaul of the CIP program. Already, the UK has pulled the visa. We have already been barred from applying for immigrant visas by the United States, or to go to the United States, what is called in parlance, local parlance, the green card. Now, the EU is the third important jurisdiction that has signaled trouble, because in its latest report, it has indicated that notwithstanding the various legislative changes and the various approaches by the government to attempt to ameliorate and to reduce the level of risk by the CIP programs of the Caribbean, they have cited that it has become an existential threat just by having a CIP program. And so we don't want to push panic buttons or to cause fear or alarms, but it is important that as we go through this very difficult period, that we bear in mind that the UK is also signaling that the CIP program which we manage today is an existential threat, and it is a clear and present danger to their country. We cannot, therefore, continue to manage the program in the manner that we have. The lack of transparency, the lack of timely reporting, and incomplete financial updates to the nation about this very crucial situation that we're in. This is not a time to play politics. I was frankly very disappointed by the statement coming from the Minister of CIP in Parliament, which suggested categorically that the CIP program had nothing to do with the withdrawal of the UK visa-free access which we have enjoyed for decades. This is unfortunate. Every single person in St. Lucia knows that the CIP program has had a significant bearing on the decision that was taken by the UK. So to attempt to blame St. Lucian nationals only is a very sad state of affairs. It tells me that the government is in self-denial. It tells me that the government hasn't learned its lesson, that what will take us out of the hole that we're in and the troubles that we're in would be the truth and nothing but the truth. I thank you.
Good morning to you members of the press in St. Lucia here and to all persons viewing this press conference overseas. I want to take off from where my colleague Dominic would have left off, where he has given you a sense of the inadequacy in reporting on the CIP, and in large measure its mismanagement, and what we know has led to the situation where every St. Lucian, that's the situation where what every St. Lucian faces now, not whether you are a supporter of the Labour Party or a supporter of the United Workers' Party or a supporter of no party. The truth of the matter is that we have a government which has mismanaged a CIP program to the extent that today every St. Lucian faces the reality of having to pay to get a visa to enter the United Kingdom. That's the bottom line. We would have spoken about that ad nauseum in the campaign leading up to the last general election, but everybody was heady with political party politics, taking their eyes off the important issue. The important issue being, what are the policies that are in the interest of all of us in St. Lucia? So today we are paying a price, a heavy price. Now, I think we need to, and my comment said this morning in this press conference is basically to look at the debt. Not in depth, but just to speak a little bit on, as you would have realized, the government plans to commit St. Lucia further in one sitting to over 600 million EC dollars in debt. We will come to that, but I speak to the CIP program because the CIP program was meant to serve critical purposes in St. Lucia. It was not a program that was meant to meet recurrent expenditure, not a program meant to see about ordinary recurrent activities such as the STEP program or any of those recurrent expenditure programs. These are important programs. Let me not downplay this. These are important programs, but the CIP funds were not meant to go towards those recurrent costs. They were meant to go towards projects that would be transformational for our country and for our economy. And the debt we're about to contract, that's additional $600 million in debt. Had we managed the CIP program as it ought to have been managed, we would perhaps not be in a position where we would have to commit our country to that level of borrowing and commit the future generations to a level of repayment that they themselves have no responsibility for. So we have to see the contribution made by Dominic and his concern. It was perhaps in the context of the access, the visa restriction or visa requirement for us to enter the UK. But it is even wider than that. It is the opportunities that we perhaps have lost in financing some of the projects we are going to be borrowing for that could have been financed through the CIP. So we need to look at this thing in totality. The CIP was meant to address serious capital projects in our country and situations where we have a national or natural disaster. These were the reasons why the CIP funds the CIP and these funds were supposed to go towards. So we have before us now a situation where in the lower house of Parliament, the government has approved over just about $600 million of additional commitments. Now, quickly, you will recall that when the St. Lucia Labour Party assumed administration of the government in 1997, the total debt stock that was accumulated by St. Lucia from 1964 to 1997, the total debt stock stood at about 562 million EC dollars. 562 million EC dollars. That was the total amount of debt. And in that time, you would recall, and you can see for yourself today, we had the government of St. Lucia under the leadership of Sir John Compton would have constructed the Roseau Dam, would have constructed the Carters-Grizzly Highway, would have undertaken Urano International Airport. All those capital projects would have been undertaken over that period of time, and the total accumulated debt was $562 million. The debt to GDP ratio, meaning the amount of our debt that we compared to our total output, our GDP, the ratio was in the region of 36.7%. Now, let us take a look at what has happened, and we will see a pattern emerging. You know, during COVID, I recall clearly, and you in the media would recall, there was a phrase that the then opposition came up with. They called it Madi Puete. You know what Madi Puete was about? You would recall very well. It was about the Alan Shasney government then. The comment was, they are going borrowing every Thursday. During COVID, when every government was asked to borrow, because that was what we had to do, the opposition was criticizing the government for borrowing Madi Puete. Well, in all of that, we never, during COVID, borrowed $600 million or committed St. Lucia in a crisis to $600 million. So I've painted a picture to you already, saying over 30 years, total debt stock with all capital works undertaken, $562 million. But we have a government in office, in one sitting, in one day, will put to St. Lucians a reality that we will commit you to $600 million. Now, I just thought perhaps it would be important to look at things in context, because we have to be fair. And this press conference is not meant to score cheap political points. That's not what this is about. There is an opposition in St. Lucia. It is the United Workers' Party, and it has a duty and a responsibility to speak to all St. Lucians on issues that will affect all St. Lucians. Just as we spoke on the CIP, and today we see the results, we have a duty to do that. So between 2017, the United Workers' Party would have come into office in about June 2016. So we look at the years, the real full year from 2017. Between 2017 and 2019, the United Workers' Party would have accumulated a total amount of borrowing of $370.4 million. Between 2017 and 2019, the total borrowing by the United Workers' Party was $370.4 million. The average borrowing per year would have been about $123 million. So let us look at what happened between 2022 and 2024. We're comparing 3 years and 3 years. The St. Lucia Labour Party would have borrowed $921.3 million EC dollars. So UWP borrowed 2017-2019 $370.4 million, and a Labour Party between 2022 and 2024 would have borrowed $921 million. So you see Madipuete, which is where we had COVID, in that time, our total borrowing for 20, let me just pull it up for you. Before I go to that, I wanted to say something else for you. So in 2019, when you look at the social and economic review of 2024, you could go there, you could read it for yourself. So what I say, you could go and verify. Our total debt stock in 2019 was $3.4 million, which would have included our receivables. Our debt to GDP ratio in 2019 was 60.4% of GDP. We were well on course to meet the ECCB prudential requirements of your debt to GDP not exceeding 60% of GDP. So we were at 60.4. So it is COVID, the COVID pandemic of 2020 and 2021, which would have caused the government to undertake excessive borrowing, because that is what it had to do. And that is what would have led our GDP per capita to our debt to GDP to rise above the near benchmark prudential limit that we had. So we need to bear in mind some reality, that with a $600 million one-time commitment of St. Lucia, our debt, our national debt, is projected to rise to approximately $5.7 billion. So after this borrowing, the debt stock, the total debt our country would have to pay, would be in the region of $5.7 billion. So in less than 5 years, this administration in office will have increased St. Lucia's national debt by nearly $1.8 billion. The government has added more than $1 million to St. Lucia's national debt every single day since they have taken office. Every single day. That's really where we are as a country. Now, when we look at the purpose for contracting that commitment of $600 million, not all of it is direct borrowing by the government. Some of it is by way of the government providing what we can simply call guarantees. So that, for instance, the St. Lucia Air and Seaport Authority is going to undertake borrowing in the region of $121.5 million. The central government will not be the one contracting that debt. But because the government will be guaranteeing that debt, this is going to be reflected as part of our national debt. And so we look at that one borrowing of $121 million by SLASPA. And as members of the media, I urge you to do some research, do some reading, ask some deep questions on this simple matter. And the $121.5 million debt is to go towards SLASPA rehabilitating berth 4. And berth 4 is really what is supposed to serve for our cargo berths. And as media practitioners, I'm sure you would have read in the manifesto of the St. Lucia Labour Party, their plans in this term to move cargo operations to cul-de-sac. And with that in mind, you would then most likely ask yourself, but why is SLASPA undertaking such a significant investment on berth 4 for cargo? You would also tell yourself, but isn't berth 4 also used for docking cruise ships? And I think if you ask that question, the answer is yes. And then you would probably ask yourself, but if it is being used to dock cruise ships, is the head tax that will be collected by the passengers who dock against berth 4, the head tax collected there, is that going to go to SLASPA or will that go to GPH? Because we know that GPH has a contract, and in that contract we understand that they are to receive $10 out of the $12.50 head tax that is levied on every cruise passenger arriving into St. Lucia. Now, I have never seen the GPH St. Lucia government agreement. I don't know if any member of the press has seen it. I have not seen it. I have not seen it simply because the government of St. Lucia has not made it a public document. So everything I say here is speculation. So we are in a situation where we are not sure what the arrangements with the government and GPH are in the agreement. And therefore, if the government is going to ask SLASPA to fund a development at berth 4, the questions become, are the revenues from the cruise ships that will be docked against there, will that come to SLASPA or to GPH? If it will go to GPH, should it not be GPH to finance the construction of the berth at the rehabilitation work on berth 4? I don't know. I don't know if you have the answers, members of the press, but I don't know because I have not seen the agreement that exists, I understand, between GPH and the government of St. Lucia. I raised these questions this morning in the context of this debt, more to provoke you, members of the press, to undertake some additional research. Because we do not want, as an opposition, to come across in a manner which some might describe as us causing trouble. We only want St. Lucians to be exposed to all the information. We want St. Lucians to be exposed to the truth about how our country is developing, about the commitments being made for them and the children and the children's children by way of debt, and that you are in a good position when you evaluate what is happening in your country. I want to thank you for your patience this morning, and of course, I think right now Dominic, Marcel, and myself will stand here to take any questions that you might have.
Just a first question from me to
Dominic.
Mrs. Johnson. You mentioned about the water situation requiring urgent action. What are some of your recommendations presently to alleviate some of the problems we currently face?
Okay. The water situation has not been a problem that has existed overnight. This has been going on for many years. And this project that I would have referred to, this started under the Labour Party government, and the United Workers' Party continued the project, which began with the desilting of the dam, constructing the sediment disposal area. And this project should have taken about 8 to 10 years had it completed, so that we would have had better storage capacity, and it was stopped. Now, there are a lot of recommendations which were included in the John Compton Dam report, which was presented by members of WASCO. And there are videos online which shows. Had all these recommendations been fulfilled, we would have been in a better situation. So if the desilting of the dam, which is critical, had continued, say for the last 5 years, we would have had more storage capacity. We would have been able to continue with, in terms of looking at the deforestation around the dam and including measures for that, rainwater harvesting. So there are many recommendations that are out there, but they have not been implemented. The project has just been left to languish. What this government needs to do is to ensure that they prioritize this project and to continue what was started so that St. Lucians would get water in their taps, because water is life. Without water, life cannot exist.
Mrs. Johnson, it almost seems that you're suggesting that the current administration is completely inept and that the UWP has the answers to all the issues that you listed previously. Don't you think that the government is making a genuine attempt to rectify that situation?
Okay, so what you're saying is not accurate, because I would have stated, okay, this project was started long before UWP's administration from 2016 to 2021. It was conceptualized by the then Labour Party government, but UWP saw it was a good project, they continued it. But in the last 5 years, you are in the media, was anything done to the John Compton Dam in the last 5 years? No, nothing was done. Not even one spoonful of silt was removed from the dam in the last 5 years. And the current administration was the administration in office for the last 5 years. Nothing was done to a critical resource such as our water infrastructure. Was anything done? You live in this country. Was anything done? That's the question to ask. So it's not about blaming. This government was there for the last 5 years. They continue to be in office. There's a lot of talk about acquiring loans for the dam, which I explained. They want to start putting in the raw water pipelines. This could have been started 5 years ago, and we would not have been in this situation. It's a little too late. Yes, they are doing something, but it's a little too late, because water should be a priority. If we had invested our CIP funds properly, something could have happened. If the desilting of the dam had continued, our storage capacity would have been increased, and St. Lucians in the north would be in a much better situation. When a government stops vital projects, we the people suffer. So the government needs to understand that water is life, a basic necessity, and that should have been prioritized. This is all I'm saying.
I have to add one more thing. Thank you, Marcella.
Yes.
I think the question as posed, your question was that the UWP comes across as having all the answers, and that the Labour Party in administration, which continues now, is doing all it can. But here's what I'm sure you will be able to assess for yourself. A project designed by the Labour Party in 2014, based on a report by the Labour Party, 2014-2015, good project. The Labour Party designed, commissioned the work. The United Workers' Party implemented the project. The Labour Party returns to government. The project is ongoing, and the Labour Party stops the project for 5 years. And post 5 years, it says, I am now going to start. The question is, why didn't you continue the project that you yourself decided was a good project? So it is not doing, the answer is, it is not doing everything it could have done. It could have done what it intends to do now 5 years ago. And had it done that, you and I would not be in the position we are in. So it is late. And it is basically saying that water was not an important issue for you and me over the last 5 years. And now I have suddenly realized it is an important issue. So important it is, I have to import water from Dominica. That is unacceptable, because that is an irresponsible approach to governance.
Thanks for chiming in.
Yes.
A question on the CIP program. One of the things that was mentioned was the delay in the tabling of the reports. Besides this, which you see as being urgent to table the reports, what other adjustments you think need to be made in terms of our CIP program to allay some of the issues that you've pointed out earlier on?
There has to be better financial accountability. I think that you would recall quite some years ago that we pressed the minister and we asked for a complete report of not just the CIP unit and the revenues that come through the unit, but for us to improve the reporting to also include, for example, an entire report on the CIP program itself. So when you have a real estate developer, for example, what about the escrow accounts? How much have been collected on those accounts? The reports that they publish and lay before Parliament don't include those numbers. So if we are going to improve the program, if we're going to engender confidence, to cause our allies to have respect for the program, that we're doing a good job, I think we're going to have to do that. So the timeliness is one, better financial accountability. We need to make sure that people at every level are seeing this as something crucial. There have been other steps that have been made in the recent legislation passed for the harmonization of the OECS programs together. That is a good step, but I think that is a step too late. It is regrettable that the government initially declined to join the memorandum of understanding or agreement that was signed by the various countries. It was regrettable that the government resumed Iranian nationals to apply to the program. And we see that the UK in its report suggested that they have seen an uptick in applications for asylum, and the program allows, for example, a number of areas that they would have had nationals who require a visa to come to their country, that were using St. Lucian passports to enter their country visa-free access. This caused a whole host of issues. It was regrettable that we became the last country at the outbreak of the Ukraine war to suspend Russian applications when Grenada, Antigua, Dominica, and all the other CIP jurisdictions at the outbreak of the war, in order to show solidarity, they came very promptly and said, look, we have got to show our Western allies that we are with them on this whole issue of the Ukraine war, and we are going to suspend Russian applications. St. Lucia became the last country to do so. The Minister of CIP is on record of saying that not all Russians support Putin, and therefore it was unfair for us to do that. And we've always just found ourselves on the wrong side of the CIP issue. And I think that we have really diminished confidence in the international arena. And hence, what has happened, we've seen applications for immigrant visa to the US that has been barred. St. Lucians can't do that. We've seen us losing our visa-free access to the UK, and now the Europeans are reviewing the situation very closely.
Much of what you spoke about with regards to the accountability and the tabling of reports, the SLP administration, then in opposition, accused you of the same. How do you respond?
I don't ever recall us being this bad, having 2 years of outstanding reports, outstanding. Accusations are one thing, but if you look at the facts, we always laid the reports in Parliament. If you go, our reporting standards actually were quite comprehensive in how they were submitted. So we went in and we had the programs, we listed real estate and whether they were donations to the government, whether they were government bonds. So all the pathways to citizenship were outlined in our reports. We found it quite strange when that practice was discontinued. But we have a lot of questions, journalists from The Voice. We have a lot of questions about the CIP and the late tabling of the report, and as to whether there is any correlation between the government's announcements of the election dates and the late tabling of reports. The Prime Minister said in a previous sitting of Parliament that the reports were going to come to the House very soon, that they couldn't do it because of the elections, but they were ready. Why haven't we seen the report? What's the vacillation? Why is it so late? Is the government trying to hide something? And we are very concerned about this practice that we see. But more than that, what is crucial is that nothing happens when the government breaks the law. And so we want to use this podium today to call for there to be a review of the CIP legislation. It has to also include penalties, so that if the board of the CIP is going to constantly supply late reports, that there's some kind of sanctions. If there are no sanctions, then what's the point of the law? And people are going to continue to break it without any punishment. And that's what's happening now.
And colleagues, you need to pay attention to the issue of magnitude. There are some things that might not be done, and there are implications for it that may not be as severe as what we're seeing now. The CIP involves not thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands. It involves millions, and in our case, perhaps billions of dollars. And when we are almost flippantly, not providing accountability for that, it's not just you and me in St. Lucia who can see that the government is not being accountable. The rest of the world can see. That's the reality. And the rest of the world realizes, and they take action. Where we are now today affects everyone. So if the government fails to act, it's not just the UWP supporters who will have to find a visa to go to the UK, all St. Lucians. So this is not a trivial matter. This is a heavy, serious matter. So accountability, member of the press, and the opportunity to have done that is what causes others to judge and evaluate you. There could be crises, and of course we understand. But when it is brought to the attention of the government, as it was done over and over, and to date it is not, this is the action we have. So I just thought perhaps you need to see things in proportion. There's like big sins and little sins. They are all sins, but some have more implications than others.
Having said that, and understanding that the CIP program is not a year old, it has spanned both administrations. If somebody suggested that the failings of the CIP and consequently visa restrictions that came up or that affected CIP situations that affected our visa-free statuses, would it be fair to say that both the SLP and the UWP can be held responsible for our situation?
No. Dominic is going to come to answer you in detail, but I'll say immediately, we're not apportioning her blame in equal share. It's not the case at all, because there is evidence, there's reality. You know how many visas, how many CIP passports were issued over the entire period, 2016 down to 2021, by the Alan Shasney administration? I think it was a total of 840? 800 or thereabout. 800 passports issued over a 5-year period. How many passports have been issued in the last 5 years? Do you know? I don't. But we know it's a lot more than 800 based on what we've heard the Minister for CIP say in different fora. Dom, you can give some more details.
So the information is available on the CIP website. So Titus is absolutely correct about the numbers from 2016 to 2021. Now, if you went to and you examine the reports on the CIP site, you will see that the numbers have significantly been increased. So, for example, in the year 2023-2024 alone, the government's own numbers suggest that they have received 5,000, listen to me, 5,642 applications. That's a massive number. That's a 423% increase in the number of applications. Now, if I went back towards 2022 and I did like a 3-year comparison of the number of applications that they have received and approved, we will see that that number is close to 7,000. Now, I did tell you that that's up to March 2024. It means that there are 2 years of outstanding reports when we would have seen great momentum in some of the local real estate projects here in St. Lucia. So,
are you conflicting applications with approvals?
So I'm getting to it now. What is very interesting is that if you look at the applications denied, the trend has been that very few have been denied. In fact, the most applications that were ever denied in any given year was 77, which was that last period. So just imagine, the government says that in its last period, it approved 1,100 plus citizenships, okay? Now, it means that if you've only denied 77, look at the rate of approvals. It's a massive number in terms of the number. So over 90-something% of the applications based on the trend will be approved by the government because there are very, very few denials that we have seen from 2021 that has come through the table.
I just have a final question for Mr. Prevel. Just given your background, I just want to shift a little, not totally. Over the last several years under both administrations, there seemed to have been a very heavy focus regarding our economy with tourism and now, of course, CIP in terms of revenue. I just want you to offer us, the public, members of the media, your summary as to the direction you believe, not just this government, that St. Lucia should go in terms of building our economy. In the past, you'd hear things about agriculture, commerce, tourism. But like I said, in more recent times, the focus seems to be heavily on tourism and now CIP. I just want your perception, your views on that, and some kind of summary, especially in light pretty soon we'll be going into a new budget cycle.
Well, we'll see what the government has to offer in its new budget. And to be quite honest with you, I don't even know if I really want to answer your question. I don't want to be rude because we had a manifesto issued very recently in December where we outlined our plans for development of St. Lucia. And as you can well see now, these plans were not the plans that the people found favor with. So when you ask me the question, as a political party, I could say to you, we had outlined our plans, and our plans were very comprehensive to move our country forward. We had a plan that addressed agriculture, that addressed tourism, that addressed new areas for development. We looked at the construction sector in a very dynamic manner, giving you the methodology. We looked at a critical area called health, and people don't attach sometimes health to economic growth and development. But if you don't have a healthy people, you cannot work, your productivity falls. We had a program that looked at infrastructure, the transformation of our transportation infrastructure, and how that would have transformed our economy. But as I said to you, as a party, that's what we presented. But the people had different views. So to actually tell you what I think our political party can offer, I think it's a moot point. At this point, we just have to let the government of St. Lucia undertake its work. As an individual person now, Titus Prevel individual, I think the options for our country are clear. A lot of what is in our party's manifesto is what should have been done, person. In addition to that, a focus must be on human capacity and development in the area of strengthening innovation. We have to look at the platform economy in a real way. We have to look at investing in our young people so that they could be focused on the digital economy, in creating products. That's where it is. It's about intellectual property advancement. Tourism will always be a critical part of our economy. There's no running away from it because it is what it is. We are a services-based economy. And sometimes people speak about the tourism in a sort of derogatory manner. The issue is how you manage it, how much you make it inclusive. Next door, Barbados, significant component of the economy is tourism. And when you step back and you look at the systems they have put in place to develop the tourism, you see they have a robust system, with even ministries set up for aspects of the tourism industry. So the future of our country rests at this point a lot on tourism, but the diversification must be in the area of human development, capacity development for innovation in terms of providing new services in the digital world, the platform economy. Another area that a government should pay very close attention to is migration. Migration policy is important because you would recall and see that our population is not growing as we have, and it has a number of implications. Implications for you and your pensions in years to come. Because if we don't have a working population, who's going to pay your pension? We have to look at the skill sets we have. Who do we need to bring in? Who can we export? Can we use our capacity, our skill sets to export to generate income? So we have a number of things we need to do, but that would be my approach to answering your question, unfortunately.
Diversification of the economy, but we've also been hearing diversification of agriculture since the John Compton era. Again, under both administrations, we've not really seen that taking root. Alternative crops and even the linkages between agriculture and tourism, as you just spoke about so eloquently.
We had a plan for agricultural development. In fact, when we
we're talking about plans here, but I'm saying these things have been spoken of from generations now.
Absolutely, and the life is such that when you fail to do something, you don't stop. You have to keep going. So, and you will see in generations to come, agriculture will be continued to be spoken of. What we had done, though, is we had identified our 7 priority crops from 2016 to 2019. We were about to implement the strategy when we found ourselves out of office. Critically, in the last 5 years, nothing happened for agriculture. What happened to the 7 crops, the plan? Nothing. We had proposed in our manifesto how we intend to take agriculture into tourism and beyond. Our plan went beyond just domestic agriculture, but we are not in office. So we leave that to the government to undertake.
Just to follow up a little bit, how do you rationalize the fact that St. Lucia is not isolated in its visa free access denial and the CIP situation as well? There are a number of countries suffering that same fate. Also, St. Lucia, if memory serves, is not even in the top 20 with regards your asylum seekers. And if you take into consideration that the UK actually admitted that most of the asylum seekers were denied, in 180,000 people with not so many asylum seekers, if most of them were denied, then it seemed to me that the issue seemed less about asylum seekers. And in my estimation, as somebody suggested, it's more about revenue generation for the UK and the US and Canada.
I think not, and I'll tell you why. You know, this is a Labour government in office as we speak right now. Am I right? It's a Labour government in office in St. Lucia, correct? And in England, it's a Labour government in office. I'm also correct in that. And St. Lucia has had a long history of close relationships with the United Kingdom. In my humble view, when a UK Labour government will undertake such a policy stance with respect to another sister Labour government, there must be a fundamental problem, a serious problem. I think every St. Lucian must be able to understand that. the British Labour Party would not have undertaken that action on a flippant manner. It would have looked at its entire history as a country with respect to St. Lucia, colonial past. It would have taken on board the fact that this is a Labour administration in office. This is a Labour administration in office in St. Lucia. They are sister political parties. And to do that would have serious implications for all St. Lucians. So I am sure what the British government cited there was, and perhaps what they have not told us also, are very serious issues that would have caused them to go in that direction. And I don't think we can invent something such as the British government looking for money. 180,000 people in St. Lucia. How many actually will travel to UK to get a visa? And that would make a contribution to the United Kingdom's revenue? Come on. We all know that does not add up. So that is like what I call fake news. That doesn't add up in any material sense. Dom, you may want to take the platform.
So let's put the visa situation into context, because the first claim, the only two CBI countries in the OECS that have had their visas to the UK withdrawn is Dominica and St. Lucia. So we must ask the question, why haven't they removed Grenada's? Why haven't they removed Antigua's and St. Kitts? In fact, St. Kitts have sold a lot more citizenships than we have, because they were the first CIP country in the Caribbean, the first CIP program in the world. So if they have sold a higher volume, we are a late entrant, why hasn't the UK removed the visa-free restrictions on St. Kitts? The other thing that we must bear in mind is that the barring of St. Lucian nationals to apply for the immigrant visa is also another crucial blow to our own domestic situation and the quality of our passports. The only other country that I can recall this happening to is, and it's not similar, but it's different. It's a different visa category, and that's when it happened to Antigua and back to Dominica. Now, an important component of this that we have not mentioned all morning, and that is, I think we must be on guard that our banking relationships, because in the case of Dominica, they have lost a lot of corresponding banking relationships because of the CIP. The banks have seen the CIP program as high risk, and because of that high risk, they are not doing any more CIP transactions out of Dominica. So therefore, in the case of Dominica, the only bank that does CIP transactions is the domestic bank located in Dominica. But all the other international or expatriate banks that are in Dominica have actually suspended doing CIP transactions because of that. So we must now take heed from what is happening before we get to that stage. Now, we are not trying to cry foul. And we've asked the government repeatedly, we've warned the government about the visa-free access. They said we were scaring the country. They said that we were here to destroy the country. We live in St. Lucia. We want this to work, but the government must take heed because the consequences are quite serious. Any other questions? That's it. Thank you guys very, very much for coming. Thank you all. Refreshments.